they don't run the ball, and so they're probably not going to fumble the ball. So I think if BYU is going to force a turnover, it's going to have to be interceptions. And again, Shedeur has only thrown 8 interceptions. So if BYU can force at least 1 or 2 interceptions and kind of get under the skin of Shedeur Sanders, I think that puts them in a position where they can win the game. Hello and welcome to the Aptive podcast studio. This is the Loyal Cougars podcast, and I'm your host, Jake Edmonds, former sports reporter for KUTV in Salt Lake City, lifelong BYU follower, joined by my partner, Tosh Mackintosh, also lifelong BYU follower and resident BYU insider. Tosh, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It's fun to be here talking about BYU.
Holiday week. We've got a bowl game coming up on the 28th. This is the best time of the year for college sports. If you're a BYU fan, this is the best time of the year. Conference play starts up in basketball. We'll get to that. Also, the transfer portal. We got some news there. Basketball and football. We can talk about both. And not just transfer portal, but recruiting as well. But let's start off with college football. BYU playing Colorado on the 28th, the Alamo Bowl. And it's a game that I think a lot of BYU fans have anticipated. And maybe some BYU fans weren't a huge fan of leading up to as they were about to announce who BYU was going to play. And it's, for somewhat good reason. I think Colorado is a team that BYU fans are somewhat familiar with, even though BYU hasn't played Colorado in decades. It's been a long time. It's a conference opponent. It's an opponent that has a lot of common opponents with BYU. In fact, Kansas beat both of them. And so I think BYU fans wanted to see something a little bit more exotic. They wanted to see a Miami or a Clemson. I personally did leading up to bowl selection. I wanted to see a Pop-Tarts bowl game against Miami just because they had a lot of hype throughout the whole season with Cam Ward. He was obviously a Heisman favorite, a Heisman candidate coming in. But I think the more that I've researched this game, the more that I've looked into Colorado, I'm really excited. I think Shedeur Sanders is going to be a great challenge for BYU's defense, who has typically forced a lot of turnovers, specifically a lot of interceptions. And Sanders is a guy that doesn't throw interceptions. And so I think it's going to be a great challenge to see if they can force him to throw the ball errantly, throw any interceptions. And obviously a lot of hype surrounding Travis Hunter now being the Heisman winner, and just Deion Sanders in general. I think Colorado is a media darling, and so BYU is going to get a lot of attention just because of who they play. And that's a big deal. And I think this is a game that can springboard them into next season, into conference play next season, or not if they lose. But it's a huge opportunity for BYU.
Yeah, I was really looking forward to this game initially as a conference championship game. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of hurt when that didn't happen. And then in the bowl season, I really look at the Big 12 as like our teammates. So it does feel weird that we're going against one of our teammates instead of us showing and Colorado showing what we could do against the SEC or Big 10 or 8. Yeah. Like that would have been awesome. But here we are. So now I've come to terms with it. And what I'm excited about is that there will be a ton of eyeballs on this game. That Colorado all year and last year, to be real, have pulled in huge amounts of viewers. And this game will be no different. And if you are Chase Roberts, if you're Lassiter, like how are you not stoked to try to have a big play against the Heisman winner? Mm-hmm. If you're Jay Hill even, like I'm really excited as a fan. What can Jay Hill scheme up to slow down maybe the guy that's going to go number 1 in the NFL draft? Like, it's going to be really fun to watch.
You bring up a good point. Is Jay Hill the type of guy, because Colorado's defense, to be completely honest, overall is not great. They do pressure the quarterback, and they have the Heisman winner. But and Travis Hunter is an elite corner, but he only defends half the field, right? And so Colorado's defense has given up a lot of points and given up a lot of yards to conference opponents throughout the whole season. So is Jay Hill the type of defensive coordinator that looks at Travis Hunter and says, I'm just going to throw the other side of the field. Whoever he's guarding, I'm going to throw it away from him? Or is he the type of guy that sends a Chase Roberts or sends a Darius Lassiter or Keelan Marion downfield and takes a shot at him?
Yeah, I think that if I'm Aaron Roderick, I think that they're going to just play their game. You look at, and a lot of it's even Retzloff, And some of fans have, we all have the brutal fade route he threw again. I think part of that is that he's going to do what he thinks the defense is giving him and lines up. And I think they're going to throw at Travis Hunter. I think that Retzloff and A-Rod are stubborn enough would be one way. The other way could say confident in their players enough that I don't think we're going to avoid Travis Hunter.
Yeah, and I said Jay Hill, so thanks for correcting me there. Let's shift gears though and talk about the defense, because Jay Hill is the type of guy who likes to draw pressure. I think Shedeur Sanders does really well under pressure, and so is Jay Hill. Going back to my Jay Hill question, is he the type of guy that will try and rattle Shedeur Sanders, who is very unrattleable, right? A guy that he actually seems to thrive under pressure. He rolls out of the pocket. He keeps his head up. He's only got 8 interceptions on the year, and the highest completion percentage out of anybody in the NCAA, and highest career completion percentage out of anybody in NCAA history. So a guy that does not make bad decisions. Is he a guy, and is Jay Hill the type of coach that thinks he can draw up pressure to rattle Shedeur Sanders? Or is this kind of just a Shedeur Sanders is going to get his yards, we're going to kind of do a bend, don't break type of defense?
No, he has to give pressure. That Shedeur is so accurate, maybe the most accurate. When you look at the stats, maybe the most accurate in college football history, completion percentage-wise. You cannot give that guy time or he will just torch you. What gives me confidence is BYU has been great at actually quarterback pressures all year. We've been not very good at getting sacks for whatever reason. Those two don't correlate. But we've been incredible at pressuring quarterbacks, and we're going to have to. If we give him time to figure out our defense and find their receivers are incredible athletes. If we give those guys time, they will get open. Mm-hmm. We have to pressure. And I think that's Jay Hill's. That's his go-to. That's what he feels comfortable doing. That's what he's going to be scheming up going into this game.
Yeah, no reason to reinvent the wheel. Now, just for comparison, Shedeur Sanders is by far the best quarterback BYU is going to face this season. BYU has also faced the number 2, number 3, number 8, number 10, number 12, and number 13 quarterback in the Big 12 based on PER, passer efficiency rating. And so, number 2, number 3, but then there's a huge gap, right? So I don't think BYU has really faced a quarterback this year, maybe SMU's, right, Jennings, that has tested their defense. That has really tested their. I think BYU's forced turnovers, right? I think Avery Johnson's a good example of a guy who they could rattle.
Yeah.
A guy who's a good quarterback, right? Who's viewed as a good quarterback. I think that game, that Kansas State game, really showed BYU fans this is what BYU is capable of. They can drop pressure, they can rattle a quarterback. But they haven't really faced a quarterback like a Shedeur Sanders who gets rattled easily. Right?
Correct. And BYU hasn't really faced a quarterback this year that's just a passing assassin.
Yeah.
The guys that have torched BYU this year have actually been great running quarterbacks.
Yep.
And people erroneously view, hey, Shedeur is Deion Sanders' son, and he's an incredible athlete. He's probably a dual threat, but I bet he could be, but he actually is most comfortable passing. And even when he gets pressured, he usually is just avoiding the sack and then throwing the ball. And that's going to be the test, is what can we do with a guy that is just accurate beyond belief? But what gives me some hope there is the guy that was supposed to be that guy going into the year was SMU's starting quarterback, Stone. Mm-hmm. But we just put so much pressure on him, they had to take him out of the game. They had to put in the running quarterback. And so can BYU, again, with a guy that wants to be in the pocket, can we dial up enough pressure to really throw them off their game? That's going to be, I think, the matchup of the game is which team can defend their quarterback.
Yeah, a defense that forces a lot of interceptions versus a quarterback that doesn't throw a lot of interceptions. And I think that's going to be the key matchup, like you said, of the game is can BYU force Shedeur Sanders to throw 1 or 2 interceptions? And I think if they do, I think they've got a really good shot. What's wild to me is that Colorado has the Heisman winner. They have, I think Shedeur finished 5th in voting. So they have
But people think he might go number one in the draft.
Totally. So the best quarterback
Yeah.
in this class, and they didn't make a conference championship. They didn't even make the playoffs. Like, how does a team with so much talent not do that? And I want to talk about Travis Hunter because I think he is an elite receiver. At least, the catch that he made against Utah. I haven't watched a whole lot of Colorado games live. I watched the Colorado-Utah game live. That catch that he made against Utah where he went up and snagged it over the Utah defender is a Heisman-worthy play. Just as a receiver, right? And then you add his defensive accolades. So are you more scared of Travis Hunter as a receiver or as a corner?
As a receiver. I think that's where if they're throwing up a ton of points on us, we're in trouble. I think that we're going to be fine, though, in slowing them down. What's funny to me is Colorado, as you pointed out, they have more high-end talent, but in their 2 losses, they actually looked really bad.
Yeah.
Like, blown out, weren't really much of a chance pretty early into those games. That hasn't happened. BYU has been in every single game and had a chance come down to a couple plays in both of our losses. And so it's like, to me, can BYU punch them in the mouth enough and where they're like, hey, we don't need this, we're going to the NFL. Can they throw them off their mental game? That's what is there something about Colorado that they can break mentally where BYU could run away with it?
Yeah.
That will be interesting to see. And wouldn't that be a huge awesome jump into the offseason?
Totally.
If BYU with all those viewers was able just to blow out Colorado.
Yeah. And all the implications of it. So predictions. Because I think these teams are very evenly matched, and I think right now Colorado is like a 3-point favorite, so it's pretty even. What has to happen for BYU to come away with the win, and what has to happen for Colorado to come away with the win?
So for BYU to win, we have to protect Retzlaff. Our starting right tackle's out and our second string right tackle is out. For the most part, BYU is playing their full squad, but to be with your third string right tackle, that's the question mark. That's going to be the key to the game for BYU. The other side for Colorado, both of them comes down to can they protect their quarterback and can BYU put pressure. I am nervous about this game.
Is this their hardest game of the year?
Yeah, like I can't think of one that
I think timing wise, right? You look back at the SMU game; they're in the playoffs, right? But I don't think SMU was who they are now. Yeah, I agree. I think Arizona State maybe the other team you can make a case for.
So before I give a score, what are your keys to the game?
So I've already mentioned interceptions. I think if BYU can intercept, let's just say turnovers. I think if BYU can win the turnover battle, which I think I don't have the stats for it, but if BYU wins the turnover battle, generally speaking, they win games. And so I'm not stepping out on a ledge here, I don't think, by saying if BYU wins the turnover battle, they win the game. But that's a huge if, right? Because Colorado does not turn the ball over. They don't run the ball. And so they're probably not going to fumble the ball. So I think if BYU is going to force a turnover, it's going to have to be interceptions. And again, Shedeur has only thrown 8 interceptions. So if BYU can force at least 1 or 2 interceptions and kind of get under the skin of Shedeur Sanders, I think that puts them in a position where they can win the game. And on the flip side, if Sanders can take care of the ball, if he can find his receivers, I think it's going to come down to the offense. Like, it's going to be a high-scoring game, in my opinion. I think it's going to be like 38-35 type of game. Who's 38, who's 35? It's going to come down to that 1 interception, probably, in my opinion.
I'm with you as well. Close game. Why not? BYU has had every game's been close. Every game, my heart has been just pumping to the very end. Mm-hmm. And I think the same. I think BYU wins 27-24 in a back-and-forth game, which the last drive, everything's on the line.
Yep, something we as BYU fans are all looking forward to. I think it's nice that BYU. I remember when BYU started 6-0, and I actually I shot that. It was Arizona. I shot that game for KUTV as a freelance photographer, and so I went into the post game press conference and I asked I asked everybody, including I think Coach, and I said, does bowl eligibility mean anything to you? And they were all kind of like, not really. Like, it's nice to have, but we obviously have our sights set on something more. And but I think as BYU fans, we're all excited that they're in a bowl game, and they're in a meaningful bowl game, right? It's against a top 25 team, against all the against the media darlings. There's going to be a lot of eyes, and so
it's the best bowl game outside of the playoffs. And that's cool too.
Totally, yeah. It's a heavily anticipated game, and I'm excited to watch it. All right, coming up next, we're going to talk about BYU basketball conference play coming up, starting off with Arizona State, and then Houston looming right behind them. That's all coming up on the Loyal Cougars podcast. This episode is brought to you by Aptive. Aptive believes that every home should be enjoyed. They tailor their pest control treatment plans to target pests when and where they're most active. Plus, if you see pest activity between treatments, Aptive will return to take care of the problem at no additional cost. It's their way of making sure every customer is satisfied and every pest is controlled. If pests stay away, Aptive is why. Visit goaptive.com, give them a call, and mention this promotion to get your initial treatment for just $29. That's goaptive.com. Give them a call. Get home field advantage with Aptive. All right, so shifting gears now, BYU basketball, finishing off conference play with a win against Florida A&M, the Rattlers. I think BYU's non-conference schedule has gone about as well as BYU fans could have hoped. I think the Providence game kind of sucked, but also it was on the road. I think BYU basketball teams seem to struggle when they head east against teams that historically have been pretty good. Maybe they're not that good this year, but it's still Providence, right? Like, it's still a team that has been good in basketball. And so while it would have been nice to come away with that win, I don't think it makes or breaks the preseason or the non-conference schedule. I think the Ole Miss loss actually hurts worse just because of how they lost and
what could have been.
And what could have been had they won, right? They would have gone to the next round and played Purdue. But how would you grade non-conference play?
So I think maybe I'm being nice, but I would give it a B. Going into this year, I was skeptical. I mean, I was loving the hype of recruits like we've never got before. But I've just seen with Kentucky teams in the past where they can have an incredible recruiting class, but when you bring in all these new guys, do they mesh? So I was really worried about that. And us coming through all of preseason with only 2 losses, a lot of wins, I'm like, okay, we survived that. We didn't play very many good teams or any good teams. But that being said, to me, it was all about meshing, them figuring out each other, them figuring out the new coaching staff. And I give that a check. So I give it a B, a solid B grade, and or an incomplete. It's between those two. Yeah. Because really, no one's going to talk about this season and talk about the preseason. It's all going to be conference and beyond.
Yeah, I don't think BYU has any sort of resume win through conference play. I don't think they have a damaging loss either. Like, I don't think we're going to look back at BYU's resume and say, oh, well, they lost to Providence, they lost to Ole Miss. That takes them off the bubble. I think BYU's still firmly in position where they can make the tournament, and nothing really damages their resume. Okay, so we now enter conference play. Arizona State is the first game on the schedule with Houston looming right behind them. What I've noticed from Arizona State is that they defend really well. They have a guy, Jason Sannon, off the bench, 14 points per game. I'm going to butcher these names. Jaden Quaintance, 3.5 blocks a game. So it's a team that, kind of like a Rudy Gobert type of influence inside. Yeah. It's going to be tough to get inside and score from the paint. They also have a guy, Bashir Jihad, who gets to the free throw line and makes his free throws. So those are your kind of your 2 characteristics of this game is can BYU score in the paint against a guy who typically has a force inside, and can they keep Arizona State off the free throw line? I think those are the 2 factors of this game.
Yeah, and then on the BYU side, it's with our man Yegor Demon back. Yep. Is he back? I know he's been practicing with the team, so what I take from that is he probably could have played in the last couple of games, but that they were just like, what's the point? Yeah. But I'm really curious to see how he can jump back into things and if ASU is any good. Like similar to BYU, they haven't played anybody, and so they have a great preseason record, only 2 losses, a lot of wins, but how good are they? I'm a guy that I do trust some of the computer analytics, and the Ken Palm ratings for them, they have them as the 60th best team. Comparatively, BYU is the 40th. So that does say BYU should win, but this is one of the better teams BYU's played yet this year. And are we ready for this big step up in competition?
I love that it's the first conference game, right? That they're not starting with Houston, because it kind of ramps them up to a caliber team like Houston. Arizona State, by the way, is a team that shoots the 3 well. BYU defends the 3 poorly. And so can BYU step it up and defend the 3 well? They have the length to do so, right? They just haven't been able to do it.
Yeah.
Also, it's a team that turns it over a lot, Arizona State. And so it's going to come down to, can you keep them off the free throw line? Can you turn them over? And can you keep them off the 3-point line, right? You've got, by the way, I am not a fan of the zone on defense. Can I just say that? I don't understand it. I understand the concept of it, right? Syracuse ran it really well, right, with Jim Boeheim, because they had long athletic guys, they were active, and they forced turnovers. And really, they kind of funneled it inside. BYU, when they run the zone, it seems like they are actively trying to force the opposing defense to shoot the 3.
Yeah.
And to shoot a wide open 3, and to shoot a wide open 3 from the corner, right? So
unless that's the very right guy, that's a hard strategy to win with.
I just don't
like. Can't be really what they're doing, but I agree. That's what it looks like's happening.
Like Kevin Young is an analytical guy, right? Mark Pope at 2 was an analytics guy, and analytics tell you that the corner 3 is the most efficient shot in the game, maybe a layup behind a layup, and so you've got to run a zone. They just run it too high. And I'm not a coach. I'm not going to pretend like I know how to draw up a zone defense, but I feel like every time they run the zone defense, it results in a wide open corner 3. And if that happens against Arizona State, they're going to make them pay because they shoot the 3 well. So I will say they don't run it very often, and so it's kind of a nice little mix up there. But
do you want to hear my conspiracy theory?
Love it.
Here's what we know, is that Coach Young is way more secretive than what we're used to as BYU fans. That he wouldn't let any of the scrimmages be filmed. He is much tighter on who he lets go to practice. Like, he's a big believer that he can't let stuff out there. What I have wrapped my brain around is that he knows this was a softer preseason schedule. What if he is saving our real defensive scheme for conference play? That he's proven he thinks if things gets out, it's going to lose their edge.
Yeah.
I actually believe that he's holding some of our best defensive schemes for conference play to really throw teams off.
I hope so. And to be completely honest, I'm sold on Kevin Young. I think he's a great coach. I think he's a great recruiter. I think the fact that he signed AJ DeBansa, it speaks for itself. Like, he's probably the best recruiter BYU's ever had, just by signing that one guy. And so I'm completely sold on Kevin Young. By the way, we were talking about the schedule being weak. I think that's very much a Pope schedule, right? That was kind of a previous administration type of schedule that Kevin Young's kind of just dealing with this year. I think next year we're going to start seeing. We already see Villanova on the schedule, right? They already added Villanova. I think Duke, from what I've seen, I think Robbie McCombs tweeted about it, that they're in discussions with Duke. ESPN really wants a BYU Duke matchup with AJ, obviously here.
Well, Nike and ESPN are going to be pushing big matchups with AJ.
Totally.
Like, it's just money.
Which I love. I think there are some downsides with having too hard of a non-conference schedule. But I think losing to a Duke or losing to a Villanova early in the season, it's going to be such an if they do lose, right? If they win, it's great. Like, if they win, it's a great test. It's a great resume, piece of the resume. But if they lose, like, it's not that big of a deal. Like, it's the bottom line is it gives the team a challenge before conference play. Whereas this year's conference schedule hasn't really. And so Arizona State, like you said, is probably the toughest game they will have played. Maybe Ole Miss. Maybe Ole Miss could be better. But I love that Kevin Young is thinking about that. And maybe it's more just ESPN kind of forcing him into these harder games. But I love that they're focusing on these Villanova, these Dukes, these great teams. And the fact that Stephen A., when he interviewed AJ DeBonsa, said, "Why didn't you go to UNC? Because you could have played in the UNC Duke game." And AJ DeBonsa said, "Who said I can't play Duke at BYU?"
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, I love
the timing of
quick.
that question is so
awesome.
perfect, and the answer was so good. By the way, I'll say, I think that question, and I'm kind of going off a little bit into the weeds here because we're talking about conference play, but I did want to talk about AJ DeBonsa anyway. That interview with Stephen A. from AJ's side was so well done.
Yeah. For a high school kid, for him to have that comfort level on national TV against a guy kind of coming after him a little bit.
Yeah.
He handled it incredibly well.
Stephen A. was so, and I get that he's like a national guy, and so I don't think he really understands kind of the nuances of college basketball recruiting, and I don't think he realized or fully understood the impact that Kevin Young was having on this BYU team, and so he looks at BYU as like, oh, this team that hasn't made it past the Sweet 16 and since 2010 or whatever. The farthest they've even gone is the Elite Eight. Like they're not a blue blood team. Why would AJ pick them? And for AJ's response to just be like, I really think Kevin Young can develop me as an NBA player. And like just as simple as that. And then he went on to Stephen A.'s show after First Take, and he kind of elaborated. His dad actually said that I don't know if you watched the interview, his dad said that he took all of the NIL offers and took the dollar amount away and made AJ. He basically said, like, these are like your best NIL offers, but I'm not going to tell you an amount. So you're not going to know how much they're paying you. You're picking based on other factors. And he picked based on NBA potential, which I think is huge.
Yeah.
With all the other schools, because I think in North Carolina could have prepared him for the NBA, but the fact that he visited BYU, he talked to Kevin Young, and Kevin Young said, "We have a nutritionist, we have NBA assistants. I'm from the NBA. By the way, here's Kevin Durant. Have a chat with him." I think that was huge.
Yeah.
And so I think kind of having that in your back pocket for Kevin Young has been huge, and I think there's a lot more to come.
No, and I love what appears to be, and I've heard is the BYU new recruiting philosophy is go all out for some big-time player, and then a lot of other guys that have a chance at the NBA, you have an incredible pitch to them of, hey, do you know how many scouts are going to be at every one of our games, along with the NBA pedigree of our coaches, but that these guys that are fringe NBA guys might be able to even take less on NIL, or at least if we're just in the ballpark, go there, because they are going to, anyone that plays with AJ is going to have more scouts watching them than if they go to another school.
Yeah.
And so it's really, really cool in that regard. Stoked on it. And we get it a little bit this year too. It's funny that AJ, because he is potentially like a once in a generation player, it's overshadowing that we have multiple potential NBA draft picks on our team this year, and we are not used to that. When was the last time that happened?
Lottery picks too,
wild.
Not even. I mean, I've seen draft predictions that have him top top 5.
Yep.
I'll be honest. I still think he needs to prove himself a little bit more, but for his age, I think he's easily lottery pick. I mean, and then catchings, obviously.
And that's what I am stoked on with diving back into conference play is when we play some schools with NBA guys and with names, when we play Houston, when we play Arizona, Kansas, if him and Catchings and any of the guys on the team, it really could be their coming out of, draft me kind of moment. And that'll be really fun to watch as a BYU fan. When was the last time we were watching a game where we thought, hey, this could be the game that puts this guy on the NBA map in everyone's eyes? And we have that multiple chances with that this year in conference play.
Yeah, Jackson Robinson, maybe the last guy that
And
that had that
Yoli, I
potential.
mean, we thought that as a BYU fans with Yoli, but I think that he wasn't the NBA potential we hoped he was, but
Yeah, Yoli's challenge was that he was just undersized.
yeah, he's just in between positions.
Yeah.
Like I love Yoli, but he just didn't fit with the NBA positions we're looking for. But we've got multiple guys that do.
Totally. And they have the length. I mean, that's ultimately what it comes down to. All right, we'll get to see that this team kind of their first true conference test when they play Arizona State. But coming up next, we're going to talk about transfer portal, wins and losses for BYU in the transfer portal, and what's our overall grade. That's all coming up on the Loyal Cougars podcast. Looking to get your brand in front of BYU's most engaged fans? The Loyal Cougar podcast and Cougar Board are your perfect match. Cougar Board is the largest online community of BYU fans with thousands of posts every day. The Loyal Cougars podcast is the official podcast of Cougar Board, and we have sponsorship opportunities available for the podcast and the site. Contact us at sponsorships@loyalcougars.com, and we'll help your message hit home with the Cougar faithful. Again, that's sponsorships@loyalcougars.com. All right, let's talk about college football transfer portal. It's our favorite time of the year. Everyone talks about how the transfer portal is ruining college football. But for BYU, it seems to be somewhat beneficial. Granted, there's a lot of guys leaving. I'm actually surprised at how few people have left.
It's been great.
And it's probably because the bowl game's still happening, still coming. Utah's seen a lot of guys leave, but it's because their season's officially over, which is so sad. But BYU, obviously they've lost Cody Epps, they've lost Jackson Bowers, Miles Davis. Dallin Johnson's probably their biggest loss, I feel like.
Crew Wakely would be on that list.
Yep.
He still might come back, but yeah, he's the only starter though that I think is entered.
Yeah, right. But some guys with Ice Moa, some guys with potential have left.
Yep.
And again, it's a depth thing for me. So Dallin Johnson leaving a defensive tackle position that's already thin, and so I think guys leaving hurts. I think you can replace Cody Epps. You can replace the Miles Davis, right? He's already fourth string on the depth chart. So I think overall, who you've lost is not doesn't hurt too much. Now, who you've brought in, I would like to see more. In fact, I kind of thought this when I saw BYU's high school recruiting class. I thought it's not great, but I also think the future of college football is who you can get in the transfer portal. And so I kind of was like, I was hopeful for a big transfer portal haul, and we haven't really seen it yet. Carson Ryan, obviously a big tight end get for BYU. I will say tight ends haven't really been utilized a whole lot by BYU, at least this year. And so is that really a big get? We'll kind of see if they can utilize him next year. And then Hunter Clegg is another big one, an edge rusher that they really need. It's not a defensive tackle, but it's a guy who can set the edge and can pressure quarterback.
Yeah, he's the real deal. Like I was really sad when we didn't get Hunter out of high school, but yeah, he just got back from his mission. Funny enough, I've seen him since he's been back. I saw him working out a little bit, and he looks real good for a guy that he had got home from his mission like the day before. And I'm like, this guy looks like he could play, and he's got 9 months. So I am stoked. He was a 92 rating on 24/7 out of high school. 4-star. Like, it's a big-time get. To your point, we do need some inside defense, too. And this SUU guy, I'm drawing a blank on his name right now.
Yeah, they just signed him.
Yeah, but I was reading and listening to some people that have watched a lot on him, and people are stoked on him. What I'll also say is I'm starting to really trust our defensive coaches in who they have. And they're saying they're feeling pretty confident about defensive tackle. And I doubted them this last offseason, and we had one of the best defensive lines ever.
Yeah.
And so I think that they'll bring in some guys, but I do trust our defensive coaches to put a good line together. A couple other names out there. The Akana from Texas.
Yep.
That he has been looking at us, and I know we like him. A guy out of Utah just entered the transfer portal, Tanuvasa, and he big time player, served his mission here locally, and I would love if we got him too.
Yeah. Anybody we can get from Utah, I think, is a win. And it's interesting. We talk about SUU, and you may look at that and say, well, is this a guy we really want? Like SUU, they're SUU. But you look at the guys that Jay Hill brought from Weber, and how impactful they've been. If we looked at them with the same lens last year and thought, man, these guys are, FCS guys, they're not going to compete. Let's not recruit them. Like, we would have lost a lot more games this year. And so I don't think it's fair to discount the fact that he's from SUU and say BYU's not going to utilize him. He's not even going to be in the 2 deep. He could very well be an impact player, just like the guys who have come from Weber this year. So, and at the very least, he fills a position that BYU is thin at. And so it fills a need. Can he make an impact? We have yet to see. The other position BYU really desperately needs to fill, and not necessarily because they don't have the talent, but because they don't have the depth, and that's a quarterback. You lose Bohannon, you have Retzlaff, and I think Retzlaff is going to be your starter. I think BYU fans, I actually really like Jake Retzlaff, by the way. I'm a huge Jake Retzlaff fan. I don't think you can record a quarterback that's going to outperform him or start over him, but you've got to get a guy who can back him up.
Yeah, it's true. It's funny how short our memories are, but before this year, it had been forever since we hadn't had a quarterback, if not multiple quarterbacks, get hurt and have to play multiple guys.
Oh, yeah.
Jake's played this whole year, but then it's like, oh, we got him back next year. But I put myself in this. I'm already, till you said that, I'm like, I haven't spent that much mental energy on that, but I'm dumb. Like, who are we going to throw in there if he goes down next year?
Yeah.
And right now, that's a huge question mark.
I think this year was the first year since, I don't even remember, Max Hall, that BYU had a healthy quarterback all season. There might be a few years in between that, but it's just not common, right? BYU and teams in general, right? We saw Utah this year. Utah went through 4 or 5 quarterbacks. And so you need at least one other guy. And I think Bohannon was great to fill that role, even though he didn't play, right? And I think it's kind of unfortunate that we didn't get to see him play. But he gave BYU fans kind of that peace of mind that, hey, we have a guy who has starting experience, a guy who's a senior, a guy that is capable of running the offense if Jake goes down. With him leaving this year, we need to find another guy like that is willing to step in and is capable and has the experience to step in if and when Jake goes down, because it's more likely than not, and hopefully it doesn't, it's more likely than not going to happen that Jake goes down.
And it gives the offense confidence even in their play calls. Jake is at his best when he knows he can run. And we even run a lot of plays for him designed to run. But if you're scared of your backup, you don't do that.
Yeah. Yep.
And then you handcuff your starter. So we need I'm not a quarterback room expert on our current quarterback room. Hopefully there's some guys, but if not, we better bring somebody in.
All right, so just kind of quick glance. Obviously, there's still time to bring in some guys. Quick glance. How would you rate or grade the transfer portal recruiting class so far? Carson Ryan, Hunter Clegg. Not just in talent, right? Because they're both really good, but in filling needs that the BYU has needed to fill.
I'm stoked on it, to be honest. I would give it a solid B+, and the only reason not an A is because it hasn't been the volume yet.
Yeah.
But the sign that it is that we're getting 4-star guys, and the people that we're still looking at and that I'm hearing kind of whispers on, I'm really excited about what this staff, and I'm also hearing an influx of NIL money, that what they're going to be able to do. I actually think, I'm diving into the weeds a little bit here, NBA numbers are down. I actually think college football transfer portal is one of the reasons. It's made football like relevant throughout the year, and you only have so much time. But if I want to listen to sports talk on the NBA, or I want to listen to who BYU might get in the portal, I'm choosing the portal every time. And yes, it hurts when they leave, but I think it's made college football relevant all year round, and I'm stoked. I think we are real players in this year's transfer portal.
Yeah, it's funny to hear people say that the portal has ruined college football, and I can I can see where they're coming from, but I think in general, it's fun. Like, it kind of makes the offseason more fun. It's not just like signing day for high school guys. It's now there's like a period of time after where people are still paying attention to college football, and it makes it fun. All right, that'll do it for today's episode of the Loyal Cougars podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked this episode, or if you like any of our shows, please like and subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, click the little bell to give you a notification every time we upload a video to YouTube. If you're listening to any of the podcast networks, give us a subscribe and a review if you like what you hear. It'll greatly help us as we continue to try and grow this channel. I'm Jake Edmonds. That's Tosh Mackintosh. And this is the Loyal Cougars podcast. Thanks for listening.